Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. Now you can take those numbers. So the,
you know, like the Fibonacci sequence?
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today we are going to travel to the ancient land of Thrace. And I've always been fascinated by Thrace because they're always showing up in the primary sources. And, you know, I read through some of these books that I have over here, and, you know, it's very famous for its gold. Surprisingly, this Thrace was, you don't think of Thrace as like this rich kingdom or anything, because it's, you know, it's not like they don't have like primary sources. They're not like, you know, play writers, no Thracian historians. But then the archaeologists keep finding all of this wealthy amounts of gold, and they were very cultured. And as you can see, there's the Thracian horseman, the famous Thracian horseman, as we're going to get into in a minute here. And I believe that is Dionysus, or if not, that is what's his name? Selenos thing. I can't really tell with that. Oh, that's Dionysus actually. Yeah, the Thracian gold. There's the horse rider that looks like to be, I don't know, some winged goddess on horses. I'm not really sure what that is, but we're gonna get into a lot of this stuff. You could see this is a very famous image that people point to when it comes to archaeology in Thrace, because just look how crazy this thing looks. It's so beautiful. It's got an ivy wreath on its head. There's a lot of very Bacchic culture, I guess is a word to describe it. A lot of Dionysian artworks. These famous drinking vessels that you find all over Thrace. Stuff like this. The golden wreaths of ivy and laurel. This is laurel right here. Another crown of some sort. Look at this. Beautiful. All in one. Look at this. Is such a beautiful helmet. The Thrace. It's funny because I think of that when I think of Thracian armies. I think of that. It's so funny. Yeah. So that's just a little. Just wanted to show you some imagery before I bring on the guest today, who actually I put 2-time masters in the description. He actually just got his 3rd master's degree. That is Pat Lowinger. What is going on, Pat? For some reason, your screen just went black.
Did it really?
Yeah.
I see.
I don't know what happened, but yeah, I don't know what happened. That's weird. You can see me good?
Fine.
Your screen is completely black right now. Maybe try to unplug and plug it back in, maybe?
Sure.
All right. Maybe that'll work.
Maybe I need to stop with the effects.
Oh, is that what was going on? There was effects. Oh, yeah, you had your background going on. Maybe it was glitching you out a little bit. But yeah, man, you have 3 masters now. When are you going to write your dissertation?
It's a process, man. It's getting it done and getting more research and more funding. And
nothing wrong with getting more masters, dude. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have any. I don't even have a master. So who am I to talk?
Am I back now?
No, you're still black. Did you turn your camera off and turn it back on?
I'm going to try something here real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to go out and then come back in.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So while he's doing that, I'm going to pull up a verse from Strabo. I was going to read it anyway, but I want to set the tone with a passage from Strabo that is like, honestly, it kind of shows you what the Greeks and Romans thought about the Thracians. They had a lot of respect for them, even though they called them barbarians. And by the way, that term barbarian, when we think of barbarian today, we think of like Conan the Barbarian, and like just like completely, living out in the middle of nowhere and just like war. The only thing they're good at is war. They're not cultured or anything. That type of mentality. But really, all it meant was that they didn't speak Greek, or Latin in the case of the Romans. It didn't really necessarily mean that they weren't like civilized. And the Thracians would be an example of a group of people that got a lot of respect from the Greeks, even though they were considered barbarians. They didn't speak Greek. And you could see it right here with here. I'll pull Pat up. There we go. Now you're back.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm going to finish reading this off, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. I just want to set the tone of how the Greeks and Romans. This is written in the time of Augustus, I think around 20 BC, 10 BC, something like that. He's writing in Greek, so he's a Greek writer, Roman period, that type of thing. And this is what he says. Strabo is talking about like the Dionysian culture of the Athenians and the Phrygians. And he kind of like, he's going around and talking about like, look, Kabiri, Corybantis, Pan, Tatiri, and they call the god Bacchus and Rhea, Kybele, or Kibebe, or Dindymene. According to the places where she was worshipped, Sabazius belongs to the Phrygian group and in his way the child of the mother, since he too transmitted the rites of Dionysus. Also resembling the rites of the Cotitian and the Bendidian rites practiced among the Thracians, among whom the Orphic rites had their beginning. Everyone knows Orpheus is a famous bard who came from Thrace, and he went to Phrygia, and he went to the Eleusinian mystery. Like he's got a little piece. He's like the Forrest Gump of the ancient world, where like all these different myths have Orpheus showing up as being a little part of the story. That's the best way to describe Orpheus. He's the Forrest Gump of ancient mythology. Now the Codis, who is worshipped among the Edonians, and also the instruments used in her rites, are mentioned in Aeschylus. For he says, "O adorable Codis, among the Edonians, ye who hold mountain-ranging instruments." He mentions immediately afterwards the attendants of Dionysus, one holding in his hand the bombyces, toilsome work of the turner's chisel, fills full the fingered melody. The call that brings on the frenzy, while another causes to resound the bronze-bound cotyle. And again, stringed instruments raise their shrill cry and frighten mimickers from some place unseen below, like bowls. And the semblance of drums as of subterranean thunder. Like, this is just amazing writing right here. Bowls, subterranean thunder rose along, a terrifying sound. For these rites resemble the Phrygian rites, and it is least not unlikely that just as the Phrygians themselves were colonists from Thrace, so also their sacred rites were borrowed from there. Also, when they identify Dionysus and the Edonian Lycurgus, they hint at the homogeneity of their sacred rites. From this melody and the rhythm and instruments, all Thracian music has been considered to be Asiatic. And this is clear, first, from the places where the Muses have been worshipped, for Perea and Olympus and Pimpla and Libethrum were in the ancient times Thracian places and mountains. Wow. He's basically like giving all the credit for Greek culture to Thrace. This is mind-blowing. Though they are now held to be by Macedonians. And again, Helicon was consecrated to the Muses by the Thracians, who settled in Boeotia. The same who, I'm almost done here, consecrated the cave of the nymphs called Labyrinthrides. And again, those who devoted their attention to the music of early times are called Thracians. I mean, Orpheus, Musaeus. By the way, this Musaeus character, just a little side note, gets compared to Moses in later Hellenistic Jewish writings. Aristobulus, there's another Aristaeus, and there's a couple other writers from the 2nd and 1st century BC who actually made the case that this was Moses, that this guy was Moses. Anyways, and Thamyris and Eumalpus. Eumalpus is the famous singer of the Eleusinian Mysteries who founded the Eleusinian Mysteries. Too, got his name from there. Look, he's literally crediting the Eleusinian Mysteries as being Thracian here. I don't know if you caught that. That's basically what he's saying. And those writers who have consecrated the whole of Asia as far as India to Dionysus derive the greater part of music from there. Talking about Thrace still. And one writer says, striking the Asiatic kithara, that's where we get the word guitar from. Kithara, guitar, get it? Striking the Asiatic guitar. Another calls flutes Baracinthian and Phrygian. And some of the instruments have been called barbarian names: Nablas, Sambiki, Barbitos, Magades, and several others. Just as, this is the last one I'll read, just as in all other respects the Athenians continue to be hospitable to things foreign, so also in their worship of the gods, for they welcomed so many of the foreign rites that they were ridiculed therefore by comic writers. And one of the, I'm trying to think of the name of the comic writer who makes fun of these Thracian bapti. They're called bapti, Baptist, and he makes fun of them as being a bunch of weirdos. I guess this is probably what he's talking about. And among these were the Thracian and Phrygian rites. For instance, the Bendendian rites are mentioned by Plato, and Phrygian by Demosthenes. When he casts the reproach upon Aeschines' mother and Aeschines himself, that he was with her when she conducted initiations, that he joined her in leading the Dionysiac march, and that many a time he cried, Evoe, Saboe, and Huas, Ates, Huas, Ates. Those are famous Bacchic chants. For these words in the ritual of Sabazius and the mother. So basically, in a long story short, he's basically crediting all of these amazing ancient mystery rites of Eleusis and Phrygia and even Samothrace, which we get the name Samothrace is in the name. He's crediting the Thracians for all this. So I just wanted to set the tone with that. And I want people to realize how big of a deal the Thracians actually are in the eyes of the Greeks and the Romans. And so, welcome, Pat. Tell us what you think about all this and what you want, or however you want to take this.
Well, I'm just going to start with why we're here and we're talking about Thrace. So I really, before 2016, I didn't have a whole lot of interest in Thracians or anything like that. I had a general interest in history, but I went back to school for my first master's degree. And during that, well, I finished it in 2016, but during that time, I made contacts and was invited to an archaeological excavation in Romania at a place called Haumiris. That's not important, but it's in the very northern part of Romania, right on the Black Sea. But it's in that area of Scythia Minor, where we know Thracians, Dacians, Scythians, and Romans, and a bunch of people collectively settled, along with Greeks of the Western Black Sea. And during that time, I became more and more familiar with the archaeology of the Roman period, really 3rd through 8th century Byzantine era before its collapse, really late 7th, but we don't need to argue about that. And more and more, I became interested in things involving the pre-Roman and like what we'd call the Greco-Thracian period of the region. And I became increasingly interested in, okay, why do we keep seeing, like at Tomis, right, city along the Black Sea, why are we seeing the Greeks obviously intermarrying with these Thracian locals, and then talking about how, like, even to the 5th generation of intermarriage, they were still considered ethnically Greek, although many of them didn't even speak Greek anymore by what we can tell from the epigraphic record. or if they did speak Greek, it was like they were learning it as a second language.
Yeah.
It means that Thracian culture, even though Greek may have been the preferred cultural identification, it wasn't the factual identification of the people. And that
you find it on their artworks, but you don't necessarily, that doesn't mean they're all speaking that.
Right. And we do see that one of the largest military alliances that went on from, the time of Herodotus forward, Xenophon, Thucydides, are Thracian mercenaries in Greek service, to the point where, various Greek generals are going to Thrace, intermarrying there, setting up, if you want to call them Greek colonies, but under the auspices of their armies largely going to be Thracian. It's going to be a combination of Greco-Thracian nobility. And that's going to continue up through the Hellenistic period into the Romans. And the Romans are going to look at Thrace as a very important military recruitment zone. And it's going to continue all the zones of the Roman Empire were important military recruitment zones, besides a few. But Thrace has a unique perspective because it does appear that a lot of the localized religious activities, Ian Haynes and others have written about this. He's from the University of Newcastle. He's talked about, hey, one thing we notice about Thracian soldiers is they seem to, upon retirement from the Roman military, either as auxiliaries or legionnaires, when they return, they don't just stay in the province where they retire. Many of them take pay and or property back in their home province. They want to return to Thrace. So a popular euphemism, and it's ended up in a book, Thracians go home. Not like go home Thracian. It's like Thracians are known for returning back to their ancestral land at higher levels than a lot of other people in the Roman Empire, particularly soldiers and those that were part of the Roman military in the 2nd and 3rd century CE. So I became increasingly interested. That plunged me down a rabbit hole in my second master's degree. That was the one in archaeology instead of history, to where I started looking at the cult of the Thracian horsemen and trying to identify as many Thracians as I could that appeared to be first generation, quote unquote, Roman citizens, those that still had Thracian root names rather than 2nd and 3rd generations names, where their father's name was Thracian, but they had adopted a Roman name upon their citizenship grantment. So I was looking really at like Roman auxiliaries, if I could identify them in the epigraphic record, but that means I had to learn everything I could about the cult of the Thracian horsemen to identify them and the unique iconography associated with it. And we can talk a little about Thracian horsemen, but we're here to talk about Danubian riders. But the Thracian horsemen seem to be a localized Thracian, and I'm going to say looser, into the Balkans, right? Because just to say it's ancient Thrace, it's a big place. We see this iconography and this iconographic tradition part of a localized cult of like hero and ancestor veneration, like local hero cults, and people returning from the military often, it appears to have been given the same preferential treatment as a form of local ancestor veneration and exaltation. It seems pretty common in the Roman era, and it hails back to earlier traditions of the Thracians during their period of quote unquote Hellenization, or the Hellenistic period. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I would like to show something real quick that I've just looked at with regards to like the layout. Let me just see if I can find it where I was just looking at it. Oh, here we go. So this map right here that I found, it has like the layout where you could see there's Thracian tribes. See, that's pink are these Thracian tribes. The Thracian tribes are not just in one area. They're kind of spread out. Like you see them over here too. The Bithyni, the Thyni, and then you can see the Paeonians are a little bit more over here. Phrygian, yellow, are spread out as well, because Phrygians are from over here. But why are they over here? Like it's interesting how they're spread out. And then obviously the Dacian are more up here.
And
the Getai, the Dacian.
I'm not gonna argue with that map, but we know that if we go all the way out to the Black Sea along the Danube, all that area that's Scythia Minor, kind of like that island right there, right? Yeah. That entire area was full of Thracians as well. Now they were Getic, and there's some. Again, I don't want to get into the politics of the region, but I just want you to know the modern country of Bulgaria identifies heavily with their Thracian ancestry and tradition. And the country of Romania identifies heavily with Dacian and
Dacian,
Dacian and Getic. So the Geti were Thracian, but there's like how
They're like
Thracian
the intermediator. They're like they're like in between Thracian and Dacian, because you see with Zalmoxis, he's either called Thracian or he's from the Geti.
Right. And so we have this it's a political thing that enters into archaeology sometimes on what labels do you use in these certain regions. But basically everything in the region all the way up to that little peninsula below the Danube, which is going to be Moesia, right? In a later Roman period, it's going to be having Thracians and Dacians in a mix along that area, along the Black Sea. And we're just going to call it Thracian for right now. I'm sure I'll get a hate mail later from someone who goes, no, it's Getic, and Getic aren't, they're not.
Somebody, someone wants to define it differently.
Right. And
by the way, oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, by the way, some of these artworks that you find in the Thracian tombs and temples are just so beautiful. Like, you can't, to me, shows that they were way more advanced than people think. Like, you don't just produce artists like this for being a backwater. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have high level educated people that know how to do this.
Well, and so I'll tell you what I don't want to call it an apologetic, but when you're talking to like a Greek archaeologist, I was talking to my friend John Caravas from, he teaches at college here in Athens and excavates, right? John will go, well, they imported all those high-end artists from Greece, right? And I'm like,
possible,
but why do we assume that?
Yeah, exactly.
The level of like, when we look at the metallurgy of the region, that's all locally produced. Like when
this guy's got pants on. That's not Greek.
We're talking probably Anatolian, right? Like, so we start looking at these people, and then we'll talk about some of the Danubian rider plaques. They're from Serdica. Like, they're locally produced. They're coming from the region that is Thrace. So
and by the way, this is from Darius's relief, which shows you that they were highly respected even in the Persian period, for them to be on this wall with the Scythians and the other tribes that he respected. He had Thracians on there, right here.
Well, that's all you need to know. I mean, but these are the kind of things, like, I find it fascinating that the craftsmanship that was native to Thrace, when you look at it, you're like, okay, there's some stylistic differences, but as far, I don't want to get into better or worse, but like different traditions, but
I wonder why
levels of detail.
I wonder why the Persians called them Scudrians. Is there some reason why they're called Scudrians by the Persians? Because look at this is the map, and the Persians considered this part of their empire, and they called it Scudra. I wonder what that means. I have no idea.
It's a Persian word for Thracian. I don't know.
It says Scudra was the province of the Persian Empire in Europe. The name Scudra was derived from the Scythian Scuda, which is also derived from Akkadian and Greek names for the Scythian. So that's interesting that he's considering this a Scythian province when it's really Thracian.
Well, and were the Scythians, they're going to settle in that very northern tip of that region, right? Like, so there's a reason it's called Scythia Minor, right?
Yeah.
And later during the Christian period, there's going to be the Scythian monks, right? So I think there's some historical connection as well. But, again, in Anatolia, you're going to have the Cimmerians settle, right? You're going to have these different nomadic steppe people that are forced down in these regions either. And they didn't just take completely over. They settled in with the locals for the most part, at least from what we can tell from the archaeological record.
This is the one I want people to see. Really, really, really important, in my opinion, is they found in Bulgaria. This is one of the sites you've been at?
Yep.
So this is from a tomb called Shushmanets.
Yeah, you can, when it comes to Bulgarian,
okay. But you can see they have the Ionic columns. So, but look at this beautiful architecture. Yep. Look at this.
Now, I'm going to tell you something that we'll have to do for a future
episode. Tomb, this one is.
Am I jumping the gun telling people this is going to happen like twice a month, hopefully?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the episodes I want to do after we talk tonight is going through and showing everybody the wealth and the tradition and the archaeology of the Valley of the Thracian Kings. The number, like literally hundreds and hundreds of tombs within this one region. It's not just one valley, it's several valleys where Thracian kings during the Hellenistic period and pre-Hellenistic period, the very beginning of it, were buried. And it's typically like, to show like how much Greek influence, but it also shows how much cultural preservation the Thracians had. For example, all these temples probably acted as cultic sites for the veneration of dead kings or, dead military leaders, however you want to do it. But we call it kings just because of the prominence and the deification that occurred there. And, all of these beehive structures, beehive tombs that we're going to take a look at. And I was fortunate enough to go there a couple times when I was leaving the excavation in Romania. I go, hey, let's go to Romania go to Bulgaria for a little while. So we'd go down for a week or so and spend time and meet with some of our colleagues that were in Bulgaria that we'd occasionally collaborate with, like at Kaibali and some other places, right? Varna, and Balchek and a few places on the coast in Bulgaria. But so I dug there from 2016 to 2020. 2020 was a shit year because of COVID. So we didn't actually dig. We just processed finds from the previous 4 seasons. But I was really fortunate to spend a lot of time getting to see a lot of the stuff we're going to discuss tonight in person, actually being able to engage with the material itself, and realize that there is a wealth of archaeological data showing a variety of cultic influence, both coming into Thrace, being maintained in Thrace, and in some cases, like in the case of Greece that you already talked about, being projected outside. So the region is highly influential in history. When we talk about the Thracian, cult of the Thracian horseman, why is it so important? Because we're going to see a lot of the iconography of that cult appear in the cult of the Danubian riders. Well, what's the cult of the Danubian riders? Well, I think maybe we should get into it and see if anybody has any questions, about.
Yeah. And this Thracian horseman, I've done a lot of work on this in my videos. It pops up everywhere. It's because you have Theos, or this god called Theos Hypsistos, which is from late antiquity. It means God Most High. It's actually one of the titles of Yahweh in the Septuagint. God Most High. Right. But these Thracians and Phrygians start to adopt the image of an old, going back to 3rd, 4th, 5th century BC, this old image of this Thracian horse rider, and they start applying it to this character called Theos Hypsistos.
Correct.
And then Sabazius as well. Sabazius this is how Sabazius gets connected with Theos Hypsistos, because Sabazius, even although in some cases he gets the title Hypsiste, highest, he also is shown as the horse rider. And so this horse rider image is found. You can probably tell us, how often is this thing found in archaeology?
It's probably, I'm not going to say it's the most prevalent iconographic form, because there's a lot of Roman stuff once the Romans move in that is typically Roman. But in the pre-Roman period, we just talk about, we just go, hey, did you find another horseman plaque? I mean, I hate to say that it's that common, but
it's like finding a crucifix. It's like how often do you find a crucifix in Christian lands when we're doing archaeology? Or the Mithraic, the image of slaying the bull. Right. This I would compare to that. This is a very iconic symbol that keeps on showing up, very prominent symbol, and it always looks like this. You always have them holding up some sort of spear.
Almost, I think 90% have what's known as the raised spear. There are a few that the rider has his hands down, but in those situations, he's almost always facing a female who's often believed to be a goddess, not like a wife at home, but he's facing a goddess, so the spear's not raised. But and there's typically a boar and a dog or a lion. So below the horse, it's often referred to as the hunting motif. I was fortunate enough to speak to Dr. Diliana Botiva, University of Sofia. When I was doing my research, she's kind of one of the most, she's a well-recognized expert in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe on this particular cultic phenomena. But this is a really good example.
Yeah, this is another example.
That's from Madara. I actually went to Madara to see those during my research. Yeah.
And look how many I've just showed already. And by the way, there's one with his hands down. But you also start seeing in Christian times, you start seeing saints. Mm-hmm. You start seeing saints being depicted this way. So they transfer over this art style to the Christians.
The imagery of Saint George, some people believe it's actually adopted from this region. I'm not quite there, but I think there's some good argumentation to be made about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I've read articles on that. I've read articles on people arguing that the Thracian horseman is the art.
Go back.
This is it right here. Yeah, Saint George, 11th century.
Go back one. That's known as the Madara carving, or that's actually on the side of a mountain.
Yeah,
and that is probably 8th century, six and a half. I'd say 650 maybe is the earliest it could be there.
Mhm.
But when you actually look at it, it's definitely that motif is being recycled, reused, even
Yeah,
during
you
the
can see
period of
that animal down
Christianization.
here. You see the dog over here.
Yeah, it's
And
much
then look at
more
this.
obvious when you're there.
And then notice how St. George, 11th century, he's got the spear in the same hand,
Yep.
and he's aiming it towards something underneath them. It's very similar. It might not be exactly the same.
Well, it
but
stops
you could
being a
see
boar
it's
and starts becoming a draconic type being.
dragon.
Yeah, I think it
Yes.
starts as a serpent when we start looking at the iconography, and then it's
Here you go.
a dragon. Yeah,
But look at this one. This has some other. Is that even a dragon? Like, what is that thing?
yeah, exactly. Is it a boar lion? Yeah, it's very. Again, I think the imagery, and even if you look at how later it's a cape, but initially it's traditional Greek clothing, right? Like it's but the flowing robe. I mean, the flowing cape.
Yeah.
Like it's all from that earlier.
That is pretty. This is pretty
tradition.
beautiful, though. I'm not going to lie. That's
It is.
Demetrius and George. But
you
yeah,
notice-
this all goes
you
back
notice-
to this. Look, he's got the cape and everything. He's got the
Yeah.
same dress. They're
Correct.
dressed the same.
Yeah, the chitin. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's like
the issue being, you notice George is in right profile, just like the Thracian horseman. There are very, very few, and I think it's less than a half dozen of all of these intact votives, right, that have been found that are in left profile, and they're
look
considered
at this.
really bizarre.
So this is Saint Demetrius of Thessalonica. Look at that.
Yep.
Same image.
Yep.
Same image. That's a different one. That's him. And then you could see, look at another one. Saint Demetrius. It's not just Saint George. It's also other saints. Saint Demetrius is the other example of it.
But when it's in that hard right profile, I mean, you can start seeing it, particularly like when we talk about the cult of Thracian horsemen. Now they do vary. There's a whole
Especially with the
classification.
enemy beneath type of motif. The enemy's
And, you
beneath
know,
him. He's above him. You know what I mean?
the people that want to minimize any possible connection will just say, well, that's just a common motif for the defeating of the enemy, trampling him under the hoof. And again,
And I would say
if you're
exactly that's the
minimizing it,
point.
that's fine.
Our response was exactly that's the point. I mean, that's what pagan culture was like. It was a series of motifs that all blend together and they copy and borrow from each other. The Romans and the Greeks and the Thracians and the Phrygians and the Egyptians, and you see all these ideas overlapping. This is just the way things were. It's not different when you point that out and you go, okay, they're just borrowing a common motif, and it's just like, yes,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying. And that's exactly what we've been saying.
Right, but I think they want to make the connection less tenuous to a.
They want to
pagan
make
root,
it
right?
more of a just yeah. It just happens to be.
It just happens to be that way. There's no connection to a pagan root. Whatever. I don't.
Yeah.
If that's what it takes for you to go to sleep at night,
Fine.
more power to you.
Yeah.
But when we talk about so there's a whole classification scheme that maybe we can sometime go through that was devised back in the 60s. It's been refined. I don't want to get into that, but like when we talk about Thracian horsemen, you can take all of these plaques, these votives, and they're all either square or oval at the top and flat at the bottom, right? So
Yeah.
when you look at these plaques, I guess some of them are trapezoidal. I don't want to get too crazy on it, but there's a whole classification schema for them. And the scheme, when you go through it, we look at the element types. So to be a Thracian horseman, they have to be a rider, again, almost always in right profile, holding almost always a spear. But then there's some other elements that come in that I think they're kind of important. In many cases, like this is a good example.
This is it right here. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see a tree and an altar in front of the horseman, and that
Right.
tree is snake entwined, right? So again,
Yeah.
this entire thing about entwined in the tree. Sorry, I got tongue tied. But these are common elements along with an altar. Now, sometimes the altar is missing and the tree's there, but often the tree and the altar are simultaneous, or the tree appears on a pedestal that appears to be a marble. And some people say, no, it's a pestle, not an altar. And I'm like, you're dreaming. So again, these are the kind of things that we see being depicted and being very important and prominent. And then we'll see additional elements added to where you see like what we call the hunting edition, which is again, the spear raised typically. And you'll like, in this case, you notice he's not carrying a spear. He's just facing the tree. Sometimes between the tree and the horseman, you might see a female figure, which is sometimes regarded as a goddess. Some people think it's just the depiction of a woman, but again,
I think you're thinking of this.
No, that's a different one. And by the way, that colorization was done by a colleague of mine for my dissertation.
But think about it though. Even though I know that's Cybele on the right, and remember, Strabo connects Cybele with the Thracians.
And this is one of the very few depictions that we have of a Thracian horseman in the same iconographic panel or same votive. But this is one of the ones that I actually found very interesting because it does depict it syncretizes in the same element this idea that, you know, the Thracian horseman and the goddess Cybele are together. And it's obviously the iconography is very, very tight on this, that it's hard to deny. Yeah.
I mean, I think this might be trying to depict Sabazius as the Thracian rider because Sabazius and Cybele were like a dyad. Again, but you still have this serpent around the tree here. That's another clue that these are connected.
And, you know, some people have interpreted that again as a tree of life motif. And
you want to know why? You want to know why they're right? Because you can see the fruit of the sacred fruit, which is called the ambrosia. Right. It's usually depicted as a little wafer like that.
The other thing too, that some people again think that this may be associated with some cultic activities. Both are carrying patera, right? So again, the idea that if they're both representing deified beings, obviously Cybele is a deified being, but the rider, whether he is a regular rider ascended or another identifiable god.
Isn't it interesting that the serpent guards the tree of life? But in the Bible and in the Genesis, there's a serpent also guarding the tree of knowledge. So it might not be okay. We're talking about different tree, but like I just want people to think like serpent guarding a tree motif, like very, very basic serpent entwined around a sacred tree idea. Like that seems to be something prominent in the ancient world. You find this in Mesopotamia too. And ancient Assyrian artwork.
I don't think this is coincidental either.
Like, no.
I don't want to get into the whole issue with like too much discussion, you know, Christian parallels and, you know, ancient Jewish parallels. I think it was such a common motif in the ancient world. It's undeniable, right? Like it's this idea that sacred knowledge was something that was protected and only doled out to those that were worthy to receive it, right? And then we'll talk about this with mystery cults, right? Because a lot of this iconography is going to appear in the cult of the Danubian writers. Which again,
like this one right here, for example, and we'll go back to what you said in a second. Now this one has this some sort of sacred tree with little fruits hanging off of it, and then you can see a serpent off in the distance right here. That's interesting, right? I mean, this seems to go back to Mesopotamia, is what I'm trying to say.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, I think the Greeks do. There's actually a book that I'm reading right now by what's his name? What the hell is it? Who's the author again? But it's basically about how much the Greeks borrowed from the Babylonians.
I'm going to tell you, I think that during the Bronze Age, a lot of these motifs, again,
Bronze Age is what he says too. That's when it all starts to move to the west. Everything starts moving to the west.
I think it's undeniable to talk about how cultural diffusion actually works when we look at material culture. Again, that's my world, right? You know, looking at like, why do these two types of pottery look identical and now they're, you know, 600 miles or 800 or 1,000 miles apart in the Mediterranean somewhere? Well, you know, we look at, okay, well, this doesn't appear till 100 years later in this region. Looks like initially in very small volumes, probably from trade. Then there's local production or an emulation process going. I think the same thing happens in literary and religious and iconographic traditions. Like there's only so many ways you can tell the best stories, right? And then the themes of these best stories kind of become universally accepted, but not always. Like, again, we look at some of the iconography of Egypt. It's an ancient kingdom, ancient traditions. So they have some of their own, you know, myths that seem to be very different from some of their northern neighbors, right? Or even from their eastern neighbors. But given that, like, the Greeks were highly influenced in Anatolia. It's undeniable given what we see, particularly at the end of the late Bronze Age, with the collapse of what we typically know as the Mycenaean kingdoms, right? Like the whole Bronze Age collapse, if you want to think of it as happening all of a sudden. I think it was a gradual decline into like a recession after a few notable incidents, I guess a few climactic issues, cataclysmic issues.
Yeah, if you read those tablets, those I forgot what those tablets are called, where it's basically these kings are calling calling out to each other for help against these sea peoples that are raiding them. You can see that like they're in some sort of like really bad decline going on.
Right.
And then the other guys are writing back going, our hands are tied too. We're getting attacked from the other side. We can't even help you right now. And it's like, oh shit, it must have been a rough time.
It looks like at the beginning of what would be the early Greek geometric or very late Bronze Age, that you have a lot of Mycenaeans settling in the Levant. And again, I think the archaeology shows those people are later referred to as the Philistines, right? Like it's pretty undeniable just looking at the material culture. Like all of a sudden,
they're Aegean people, Aegean culture. The Aegean pottery is found. Right, Aegean pottery is found all over that region.
Just the introduction of, like, you can just look at how, I don't want to say it's like pig production, but when we just start looking at like what the people were eating, they were it appears to have been, the animals were coming from Aegean places, being transported into the Levant and being consumed there and being farmed. Like they brought their pigs with them.
There's a theory. There's a Pelasgian theory. It's called, where the Egyptians call the Philistines Pelastet. So Pelastet being one word that we get from Egypt, but if you read the ancient Greek sources like Homer and Herodotus, going back into the classical period to even the Homeric period, there's a tribe called the Pelasgians, and people debate if they existed or not. Like, are they just a word they use for pre? Are
they an invention or not? How do we know?
But is this the name of the Pelasgians? Pelastet, Philistine. Is this where that's one theory. I've read that this is a pretty established theory. It's not widely accepted. I don't think most people agree with it, but it's just something to think about.
Well, I think if Schliemann hadn't blown Troy apart with fucking dynamite, we might have had the answer.
You might have found it.
Probably destroyed more evidence than we will ever know than anything he found, but that's just me.
Yeah. Let's go back to the Thracian horse rider. I mean, I know you brought some articles. Which one did you want me to pull up first?
Well, what I want to do is, again, because if we're going to be doing this every couple of weeks, what I did was, I'm a member of the Bulgarian Archaeological Society. You can actually join too as a just a member. But like they publish their journals online for free. So you can go to this website. Sometimes they're in Bulgarian. Sometimes you might have to ask someone to translate for you if it's something you really need to research. But about 50% of the time, they'll publish in Bulgarian and English simultaneously. And I've had I haven't talked to him in person in years, but when I was in Romania and in Bulgaria, I was fortunate enough to meet Mario Ivanov. He's actually a Romanian scholar. No, he's Bulgarian. Damn it. See, now I'm going to get in trouble. Or at least I know I think he works at the University of Sofia. Given that, like, he published an article that I saw and I said, hey, let's talk about this. And since it's free, I thought we'd put it in the show notes for everybody, but it's talking about 7 newly found plaques that are linked or identified as belonging to, or the iconography belongs to this cult that we were going to talk about, the cult of the Danubian horseman. So again, looking at the archaeology and then talking about it, I think is what a lot of people on your show, FYI, folks, Neil and I have been talking about doing this type of a show for years, but now our schedules are such that we could find a couple days a month to do it. Now that he's moved from, down to Florida where it's sunny all the time. I'm still up in Washington State, right across, like, my closest neighbor's Canada. So, and it's cold. That's why I'm wearing a jacket and he's wearing a t-shirt. But like, now we'll just bring you news from the archaeological world and talk about, like, hey, what's the larger context to, like, why are the Danubian writers even important? Why do we even care that they found 7 new plaques or images associated with this cult? Because it shows how prolific it was. Like, in 15 years, they have found 7 new, and I would call these significant finds. These are intact. These aren't little pieces. These are, large pieces. Most of them were complete or nearly complete. That help us answer more questions about what I believe to be, and I think most people that are really into this subject matter think was a mystery cult that was localized in what is today Romania and Bulgaria, ancient Thrace, and that was prolific, and Moesia as well, right? So why is it so important? Because it appears that it was syncretic in nature. It took a lot of local elements and then built on it. And maybe it was these former Roman soldiers returning back to their native lands of Dacia and Thrace and then settling among the locals and bringing some of these cultic traditions with them. And it's apparent in their iconography, but there's this very Thracian, very Dacian, very Getic root to all of it. And I think that's very popular. Like, again, like we can talk about like what appears in the iconography. There appears to be an entire mystery cult initiation that involved the sacrifice of a ram, the wearing of a skin.
Let's get into that.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's get into the iconography if we can. Talk a little bit about it.
Is there a specific place that I can find for get the iconography from? Is it in one of those journals you sent me?
Well, it's so I do think Ivanhoe talks about it. I just kind of know it.
Yeah.
If you want to throw,
hell yeah.
if you want to throw one of
I
them.
mean, I would love to show them some of the stuff while you're describing it, though, if I can. Is there any way I can find?
Well, do you
is
have
there
a
a website?
Which
one?
Well, just throw one of the images up, and we'll kind of walk through it.
Which one is it? Which one is it?
Any of the plaques of the
Danubian the horseman rider?
Not the horseman rider, but the dual rider, the Danubian, like it's
Danubian rider plaque.
It's. I think I sent you a couple of them.
Oh, okay. Let me see what you sent me. Okay,
I sent you one with a black background that's in pretty high res image. So that
okay. Let me. And then that's through Facebook, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Because we're friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
You too can be Neil's friend on Facebook for
yes, you can.
$39.95 a year.
No. Oh, you did send me. Okay. Oh, why is it so small?
I think.
Okay, I got one of them is pretty big. Okay, I can use this one.
Okay.
Let me see. I'm just gonna do it like this. I'm just gonna zoom this in, and I'm gonna share my screen, and then let's talk about. Yeah, these are beautiful.
They are, and dude, like when you see them in person, like I hate to say it, but the photography doesn't do them any justice, right?
If I upload it straight to StreamYard, I can't zoom in, so I'm gonna do it like this, so that way I can zoom in on things and show. But right now, I'll leave it zoomed out.
We're gonna start at the very, very top, right and left hand side, depictions of snakes.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's not anything. I don't want to say it's not anything special. I think everything is special. But when we look at this, again, this is often looks like 2 Corinthian columns, but immediately below that, and there's a couple theories, and I mean, there's ways to interpret this, I guess is the way to put it, but below the columns and the arch, you see what is obviously a divine being on 4-horse chariot, right?
Yeah.
Quadriga, right? Now that's typically Sol Invictus is how it's interpreted. Okay.
That's what it looks like.
There are a couple people though that think this may, because of the syncretic nature between Sol and Mithras, that this may have been that element as well.
Can I do a little rant on you real quick? A little rant. And I'm by the way, I'm actually scheduled to talk to T.C. Schmidt finally about Christmas, because T.C. Schmidt is one of the big scholars who really does not like to connect Mithras to Sol Invictus. And for some reason, I don't know what kind of magic powers T.C. Schmidt has. For some reason, like everyone just followed suit. But like, I want people to realize something, and I'm going to talk to him about this. I'm going to be very polite, because I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a good scholar. I think his Christianity does get in the way a little bit, but that's just me. We'll see. Maybe he throws something at me that I'm unaware of. But let me just finish this point real quick. Sol Invictus and Mithras are in fact depicted together in a lot of iconography.
Correct.
They're 2 different characters. So what happens is they go, 2 different gods. That's end of story. But wait a minute. There are dozens. I'm talking dozens. At least maybe 30. I can probably if you task me to go find all of them, I can get like 30 of them, of inscriptions that depict Sol Invictus Mithras as one deity. Sol Invictus Mithrae, Sol Invicti Mithrae, or yes, that's what it is. And so you can find this in the 2nd century AD. 3rd century AD, 4th century, and I think even in the 5th century, you still find Sol Invictus Mithrae as one god. So why is it that we only look at this one? And by the way, in comparing the 2, there's a few examples, maybe 3 or 4. I'm going high. I can only think of 2 right now. Maybe 3 or 4 examples of Sol Invictus and Mithras depicted as 2 different gods, but they look like twins too. So there's also the argument that they're just showing 2 different faces of the same god. Right. I'm just saying, the point I'm trying to make is why would we outweigh dozens of inscriptions with only 2 inscriptions?
So that's my point, is I'm conservative unless the iconography and the epigraphy, like you just said, warrant the synchronization. If they're syncretized, then it's important to say in this particular panel, it appears that the gods are being syncretized as one divinity, even though they're showing them twice, particularly when we see like what you said, Sol, Invictus, Mithras, right? Like
Yes.
in those places, I think it's very important to do it, to say, look, in this particular moment, these gods are being represented as one unified personage, as represented as two different, like, not entities. It's one concept, right? Like it's one god. Sol Invictus really is Mithras, right?
Yes.
In this particular panel, we don't have that. So I
right.
kind of,
you have to guess.
Maybe I get punked out by people like Schmidt because I'm still working through it, but I don't find his argument necessarily bad.
It's a fair point to point out that Sol Invictus does not necessarily mean Mithras. It's
correct.
Fair. But what I've noticed is those ideas have trickled down to the less known, to the scholars who don't really know pagan stuff, like the biblical scholars. Like
stuff, yeah.
I'm just going to say the name Dan McClellan. When I was going back and forth with him on this, he was like, it was like in his brain there's zero connection with Mithras and Sol Invictus. As if me saying that was something crazy.
No,
which is nonsense. So I'm just saying.
Phone conversation about this.
I've noticed that there's people
and the epigraphy saying,
there's people who think as if that this is like that there's no way you can connect Sol Invictus to Mithras, and it blows my mind how that became the norm in some of these circles. How did that become the norm? It's weird to me. I don't know what's behind it.
I think it started with Christian apologetics.
Yeah.
I really do.
Because they don't. It gets really. Here's what I think. I'm gonna throw it all out there, man. This is my personal opinion. I could be wrong. I think because of the early connections people were making with Mithras and Christ, with the whole Eucharist thing,
right?
How the followers of Mithras would have a ritual communion to become initiated. It was very similar to a Eucharist. Bread and wine was involved.
Danubian writers also,
and they even use the word Eucharist. They use the word good grace. They use that word. That's from Plutarch in the late 1st, early 2nd century, saying that Zoroaster invented the Eucharist in giving grace to Mithra. Anyways, then as time progresses, centuries go by, and you start seeing there's a new runner-up to Christ, which is Sol Invictus. Now, the dozens of inscriptions that are linking those two gods together, as I pointed out, people don't want to look at that, because then all of a sudden you see a timeline of these two deities running parallel. The invincible, let's just call him the invincible god. Let's get the sun out of there. The Invictus god. There's an Invictus god, and then there's a Christ god, the anointed god. I'm not even calling him Jesus. And you have the Christ god and the invincible god, and they run parallel for the first 4 centuries of the Common Era. And then Christianity takes over. So what happens is apologetics wants to separate any connections between those deities. And that's why Mithras they take Mithras and separated him from Sol Invictus. So now only thing you have to deal with now is Sol Invictus. It's late. 4th century, 5th century. You don't have to deal with the 2nd century, 3rd century Mithraic stuff. Now, I will say this, though, to sort of curb my own confidence of this and sort of show some nuances here. Just because Mithras and Sol Invictus are linked in dozens of inscriptions doesn't mean that gives you that means you can find every Sol Invictus piece of evidence and go, oh, that's also Mithras too, therefore this. You have to take it one piece at a time.
Now, where I think your argument would be stronger, let's say there's a city in Italy where the large town has one of these inscriptions where it links the two deities, and then a town down the road within a day's walk has a similar iconography, but not the same inscription. You can draw some conclusions, particularly if the temples are not always a temple, but the structures were erected around the same time. You can start drawing some parallels, but I tend to err on the side of caution on this. But again, like I was going to say, when you first were like, I don't think Dan McClellan's right, we went back to the epigraphic record and we started looking at stuff. And you and I went through the iconography. We started looking at the epigraphy, and we found a couple dozen strong links between the deities, right? This isn't like it's a one-off or a two-off. And how much is missing from the epigraphic record? Right?
Yeah.
Like we just don't
Look what
know.
I just found. Look what I just found. I happen to have this. I was putting together because I was getting sick of people acting like there's no connection between these two gods. I mean, look at this. This is not in Greek. This is in Latin.
Latin.
Dio soli invicto Mithrae.
Right.
The god, the sun god, invincible Mithra.
Correct.
There you go. There you go. There's one. Look at this. Here's another one. Soli invicto Dio. Now this one doesn't say Mithra on it, but look at the fucking iconography. That's
Correct.
Mithras.
Right.
Like shut the fuck up. That's Mithras.
Right.
So there's this one's literally doesn't even, but that actually makes it even stronger. The reason why this one's so important to me, and I think this is 2nd century or 3rd century, the reason why this one's such a big deal to me is because it doesn't even have to have Mithras on it to know it's Mithras.
Correct.
Which means when we find other inscriptions that don't mention Mithras and only mention Sol Invictus, we should be aware that it doesn't necessarily mean it's not Mithras. Because look at right here. That is Mithras. 100% that's Mithras. There's no other god that kills the bull this way.
No.
And he's being called the invincible sun god.
And it's important to note that on the other corner, we see the goddess Luna, right?
And Luna, yeah. Well,
But Luna's not mentioned in the inscription.
exactly. Here's
So-
another one. Invicto Mithrae.
Yeah.
Invicto Mithrae. He's got the solar head. Oh, look at and Sol right here.
Yeah.
So you have Sol Invictus Mithra. Here's another one.
Right.
Dio Invicto Mithrae. Here's another one. Dio
Bottoms are from
Invicto Mithrae. Here's another one. Sol. Wait, where is it?
Dude, my glasses.
That's Mithras. This is
small
Mithras being
size.
born from a rock.
Right, the Petrogenesis.
And it says Sol Invicto. I can't really see. It's hard to read that one, but that's definitely
Go
Sol
back
Invictus
up. Let me
Mithra.
see if I can see it.
It's really faded right here. It looks like Sol Invictus. It looks like Sol Invicto.
Yeah, I can't read it.
I think it's Soli Invicto.
Okay.
And then here's another one that mentions Sol Invictus Mithrae on it somewhere. I'm just gonna look through it real quick. I think I can find it.
Fuck, dude, your eyes are better than mine.
Yeah, it's hard to see it. But and then last but not least, here's the last one I didn't read yet, where you can see Mithrae
Yep.
and Helios,
Yep.
the sun Mithras.
Yep.
So okay, well, I don't know what else to tell you guys, but like I didn't even see this one yet. Dio Invicto Mithrae. D-I-M. Invicto Mithrae. Invicte Mithrae. And then Invicto. I can't see that one either. But anyways, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 13 right there. Now, if I task you to go and find some iconography where there's two gods, Sol Invictus and Mithra separate, I bet you won't find more than 2 or 3. Just saying.
So going back to that panel you just showed, one of the things that we're here to talk about the cult of the Danubian writers.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is going to be fascinating. Oh no, I meant go back to we will see that in some cases, Sol and Luna are included in very similar ways.
Oh, you want to see the
right?
The same one that I
yeah. So again, the depictions of Sol and Luna appear in some of, not all, but some of these Danubian writer plaques. So again, there's a common shared iconographic tradition for interpreting this stuff. So let's go back to
talking about this one.
Correct.
Yeah, I love this.
You will see that iconography. That's one of the reasons some people are inclined to think, well, maybe this is, instead of being just Sol, right? Maybe this is Mithras, right? Like, maybe
that's what I've been saying.
Again, I'll tell you that as far as the epigraphy, it's not there. Some people.
By the way, this is another thing Schmidt says in the famous calendar from the 4th century that mentions the birth of Mithra. Mentions the birth of the sun god, the invincible god. It doesn't say Mithras on it, but it doesn't say Sol either. It just says the birthday of the invincible god, December 25th. And then so what Schmidt does is go, we don't know if this is Mithras or Sol. It could be Christ for all we know.
No,
that's what I swear to God he says.
It's not
this.
Christ.
I know. I know. And this is why I can't wait to talk to him. Like, dude, What do you, come on, let's just be, when you see the birth of the invincible God on December 25th, the same day, a half a century earlier, that Aurelian dedicated a temple to Sol Invictus on that day.
Yeah, this is,
and this is during the time when we're talking decades within a decade of Julian the Apostate writing a hymn to Helios where he calls him Mithras. He calls the sun Mithras in the 4th century. So it's like, and I can't wait to bring this up to him. Be like, dude, what are you not seeing here? Like, do you just not want this to be connected to a pagan god? Is that what it is? You just don't want there to be at Christmas to have any connection to paganism? That's what I think.
I mean, again,
could be wrong.
No, you're not wrong. Well, but then, I mean, how strong of a connection was? I mean, the fact the date was fixed in the Roman calendar way before, right, as the solstice. That's the first thing.
That's the first thing. That's the first thing.
That's the first piece of evidence that it could be random. It
and
just
then
happened to be. But,
and let me throw at you what the criticism of that is. Well, even though the solstice was fixed on December 25th, that wasn't accurate, and there was a shift so that the real physical solstice would have been a couple of days later, a couple of days earlier. But here's the thing. The Romans didn't care about that. They still held their festivals on their dates. They didn't shift their dates. They didn't have a priest looking up at the sky going, is the solstice today or is it tomorrow? I can't really tell. They didn't care. They just fixed their dates. Correct. And now it's just like, it's so silly to me how they think that matters. Yeah. To me, it's just people don't want. I notice this every year around this time. You start to see it's not just Christians. It's a lot of these scholars that want to come off as like not being biased are trying to do this thing where they don't want there to be. They're like trying to defend against any sort of accusation that Christmas might have some a little bit of influence from pagan culture.
Again, the Romans were conventionalists, which means the fixing of the date was actually more important than when the day happened. So that it could be, I don't want to say nationally recognized, but recognized throughout an imperial system, right? Like that was more important because having a fixed calendar allowed everything to pop off at the same time, right? That's important. The second thing that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is even in our modern concept, like why are certain holidays always on a Monday? Doesn't matter when the day actually occurs. We get the next Monday off. Why? Because the day of observation is the important thing. And in the Roman world, they fixed that day. But we have days now that hey, it's the Monday after Labor Day. That's the day we get off, right? And I don't think people really understand that there are these fixed concepts that the Romans were really good. I mean, they understood astronomy, they mixed their astrology into it, but they weren't worried about being a little bit off in the actual calculation. When the emperor is saying, I need a day on the calendar that I can plan for the next 50 years. Right.
Look at this. So Aurelian institutes in 274, the festival of Dies Natalis Solis Invictus, Mithra, on December 25th. All right. The date happens to be exactly on the winter solstice, which is obviously what has shifted by then. No one seemed to care, right? And it says, this yearly festival was celebrated with 30 chariot races. The celebration would have formed a welcome addition, according to Professor Gary Forsyth, a welcome addition to the 7-day period of Saturnalia. Now, notice how these professors will say this, but people like Tim O'Neill will just ignore this. He only pays attention to scholars that don't agree with this. Right. Even though there's tons of, I just cited Gary Forsyth saying that this is a celebration would have formed a welcome addition to the 7-day Saturnalia, Rome's joyous holiday season since Republican times. Now here's the thing. You even have 238 AD. Censorius had written that the Natalia of the winter solstice, the birth of the sun. That's another source. No one ever talks about that either. And then it says right here, this festival is mentioned for the first time. This is the first time you actually have an explicit reference to it. So here's what I notice happens. In 354, it says, where the word that it says on here is Natalis Invicti. Now notice how it doesn't say Sol, and it doesn't say Mithras. So what happens is Stephen Heijman's the other one, and Schmidt and Heijman's they hate this. They question whether this actually refers to Sol Invictus, as Sol is not included in the festival name. Now, really though, on the solstice, and you're gonna act like this has nothing to do with Sol Invictus? It's mind blowing. So what happens is they attack it as like, well, we don't know what it means, so we shouldn't connect it to any gods at all. And then they just forget about it. And they just act like it doesn't even exist. And guess what? This right here, 354, did you know that most people don't even know this? They don't talk about this. You don't hear Dan McClellan bring this up every year during Christmas time. They always talk about the calculation that could have happened. We don't even know if it actually happened. Remember, the calculation is a theory. The calculation by Hippolytus is a theory based on some good evidence that might have happened. They don't actually tell you this, that the actual liturgical Christmas is not until around 350 AD. After this.
I mean, around this time, there would have been probably I don't want to say it, but you want to know why that's a big deal? A Christian establishment of holidays. This is when they're working through when are we going to celebrate our high holy days in the Christian liturgical calendar. And
yeah, look at this. In 362, Emperor Julian wrote his King to King Helios. The Agon Syllate was held in December, and between the end of Saturnalia and the New Year. Julian says it's dedicated to the invincible sun. Like, what other god is there, dude? This is perfect. This is the same text where he calls him Mithras too. He calls him Mithras in that source. Now look at this. When you think it couldn't get any more clear, you hear stuff like this. Dissenting from this view, Heijmans argues that Julian never said the Agon Solus was held in that date. Believes that Julian celebrated a different festival for the soul at the winter solstice.
Again, how many? I hate to be an asshole. How many souls are there?
What the fuck? I'm sorry, but it's so.
There may be different.
This is the time of the year where I lose my mind. I lose my mind when it comes to this time of the year. But here's the funny part. Here's the funny part. Here's the funny part about all this. Let's say for the sake of argument, because I think they're right. I think that in the 200s, sometime in the 200s, that there was calculations being made by Christians, and one of them was December 25th, along with other calculations, though. There was some for June, there was some for September, there was an October birth somewhere in there, about different Christians calculating the birth of Jesus, and they have different times. One of them probably was December 25th. But here's the thing. When they actually chose in the middle of the 4th century, around 350 AD, when Christians decided that they wanted to go with December 25th, they had to make that decision knowing that the pagans were already celebrating the birth of the sun on that day. They had to make an executive choice going, well, okay, we have this calculation that we got from Saint Hippolytus calculated December 25th. This other guy says October. This other guy says September. This other guy says June. Which one do we go with? Let's go with the one that's also on the same day as the pagans. They had to make that choice.
Well, you're giving them way more. Again, I've disagreed.
I'm trying to give all. I'm looking at all the evidence here.
We've talked about this before.
If the calculation theory is true, they still had to borrow from paganism. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's basically the point I'm making. The point I'm making is even if the calculation is true, they still had to make an executive decision and go, well, let's go with the same date as these pagans are doing. Let's unite the empire under one big festival. That's what it looks like happened.
That's the best case scenario, and I don't think the best case scenario is actually what happened. I think when we talk about the calculation theory, and I don't even want to call it a theory, it really is, in my opinion, it's a polemic against.
It's a speculation on a speculation.
Well, it's a polemic against.
It's actually a bit. It should be a big no-no. It should. And I even had scholars tell me this. In any other case, you can't speculate on a speculation, and that's not good methodology. But what happens with this particular topic is they go, well, we have this inscription on this base of a statue of Hippolytus has a bunch of inscribed dates on it. One of them says April. One of them says March. One of them says December. One of them says this. Now, in order to make the argument that he made a 9-month gestation period from April to December, you have to add in another speculation, which is, did Christians believe that Christ was died on the same day was conceived on the same day he died? You have to make that up in your head, and then all of a sudden you have the evidence. It's bad. It's bad methodology,
which is a feature of literature.
It's become the consensus among biblical scholars.
Again, knowing how stories in the ancient world actually worked. I mean, I'm not a classicist, but we both enjoy reading the histories of this period. When someone says, like, it was obvious this person was born under this celestial phenomena at this particular time, again, do I believe that Julius Caesar was born under a divine sign? Fuck no. I think it's a literary tradition, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with again, the story of the wise men and Jesus. Literary tradition, didn't fucking happen.
Yeah.
Same thing with Jesus being born on December 25th. Didn't happen, but the literary tradition dictates that it happens because these celestial events were more than just a literary tradition. They were a cultural convention. We've talked about, I know you have talked with some really good scholars, I don't want to get into it, about all of the mimetic elements with the Christian New Testament. Like, we don't have to talk about the Gospels and why they seem to be borrowing in some parts from pagan tradition and pagan mythic tradition, right? Same thing when we talk about other things. I mean, we've gone way off course. I don't even know if we're going to get to the Danubian writers tonight.
No, we're fine. This is fun.
But the idea that that Christianity was operating in some sterile field where everything they did was, quote unquote, was prima facie evidence for its uniquess.
And by the way,
none of it was. I mean,
right. That's not how any anthropology works anywhere.
Right,
there always is borrowing. But here's the thing: paganism doesn't even exist. When we say pagan, we're just saying everything that's not Christian and Jewish,
correct, that
has some sort of cultural connection to divinities or gods or festivals or whatever, and that's basically everything. So this is the last thing I want to say about this, and we'll go back to the horse riders and there's a couple of super chats. When we talk about, this is what I noticed. This just drives me crazy. Like, you get this with Tim O'Neill and stuff.
It's Christmas time. Whenever Neil and I have these conversations,
we're having, this is that time of the year, guys. We're in that season. Whenever it's undeniable where there's some sort of borrowing happening, like, for example, the Calends Fest, the New Year's Fest, where you can see a lot of the Calends Festival transfers over to the Byzantines. Most scholars admit this. You know what they'll say? Well, those are secular. What? How do you get to decide which one's secular and which one's pagan? It's all pagan. It's all non-Christian. It's all ancient. Cultic. It's all cultic activity. Exactly. But they do this thing where if they have to admit that the Christians borrowed some sort of cultural norm, they go, well, everyone was doing it. It's not a particular pagan cult. No shit. That's the whole point of paganism. Paganism is everything.
I still want, I mean, since we're ranting, I still want a Christian scholar who isn't an idiot to explain to me why we observe a continuation among Roman Christians of traditional forms of ancestor worship through the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th century until the cult of the saints is uniformly adopted in preference of that earlier Roman tradition, and then the veneration of the saints replaces that early form.
And then in the 8th, and then in the 9th century, they literally move the date. I lose my mind about Halloween too. You actually have a executive decision from the court of Constantine and the Pope to move the date of All Saints' Day from May to October, or to November 1st, which lands on the same day as Samhain. And everyone goes, so prove that they borrowed from pagans. Prove it. Are you not seeing? Are you not looking at the? They moved the date from May right around 800 AD. This is when it happened. Right around 800 AD, they take an All Saints' Day that was celebrated in May, and they move it to November 1st. And guess where it first gets moved? in Germany and France, where Samhain celebrated. What? What are the odds of that? What are the odds of that just happening to happen at the All Saints Day?
It was an obvious choice to syncretize Christian and pagan elements. I mean,
I think the same thing happens with Christmas,
right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, just replace their pagan shit with crosses inside the pagan temples, and it'll be okay. Like,
yeah, it's in Venerable Bede. Bede's got a letter from the Pope Gregory to this bishop in London. You and I talk about this all the time, basically telling them not to kill all their customs, just Christianize them, man.
Right, exactly.
You know what to do. Anyways.
Okay, let's go back to the Danubian cult because I want.
Yeah, let's go back to that. Let me just hit these couple super chats real quick, and we're on our way. Thank you, Account Accounts, for the 2. Appreciate that. Greece never existed. Greece is the biggest lie.
Well, I mean, as a unified cultural group, I kind of agree with that. I mean, there was like Hellenistic culture, right?
Yeah, you have city states.
Right.
Yeah, they're all speaking Greek.
Right.
They all speak the same language. They all worship very similar gods and
dialect the same language.
If you want to say did the country Greece not exist,
right.
But then you also have the Hellenic League,
right?
And like, what is that? Like, I don't know. I think it's
yeah.
Anyways,
argue this all night.
Yeah, Solera Knight. Thank you for the 2. Who were the Thracians? You want to just give a quick little answer on that, real quick?
Well, they're a collection of Indo-Europeans, right? That probably migrate in from Anatolia. I mean, the leading theory is Anatolian migration, maybe even some from the Getic were probably originally from the steppe. Whether or not they're Scythians or not, I don't want to speculate because there's actually some studies going on now that DNA technology is advancing quite a bit. But they were a people that settled in the region who had one distinct, well, I didn't want to say distinct language group, but there were Thracian languages, like language families that settled in what is today bottom of modern Romania, modern Bulgaria, northern Greece, into what is today the Republic of Macedonia, and even some of the Balkan states. It was a pretty large area. Now, interesting historically, there's some additive elements. Like at one point, there's an actual Celtic migration in the middle of what is Thrace. Now, some historians said, and they were destroyed by the native Thracians, but it looks like from the archaeological record, they were quickly subsumed and became kind of just married into those groups or taken as, parts of tribes or groups that were already there. But the Thracians were really distinguished by the areas they lived to. There were Thracians who lived along the coast of the Western Black Sea. Many of them were in the lowlands, were farmers, and they had a more agrarian lifestyle. In the highlands, it appears there were different groups of Thracians living in what, the mountains per se and hills. Some Thracians were much more inclined to be horse nomadic, like the Getic. Like, again, the Getic were the Getae were often associated with like some of the best horsemen of the entire region, right? Like they paralleled the Scythians in their mastery of horse archery and mounted combat. So, but kind of one of the unique features of Thracian society was their cultic worship centered around horses, and this idea that the greatest warriors of their generations were those that fought from horseback. Even if they rode horse to the battle, they got off. They rode the horse to the battle in earlier periods, probably chariots, and then dismounted to fight in some cases, or fought from horseback, which was a big contrast to like how the Greeks fought. The greatest generals of the Greek armies of like the classical period, they fought from the front rank of hoplite formations, right? Well, the Thracian kings may have even laughed at that because they would have been leading the elite cavalry of their armies. Just a different, again, there's one theory that like, because Macedonia was so close to Thrace, that the Macedonians themselves were influenced by Thracians with what we later refer to as like Alexander's companion cavalry, which started with Philip. This idea we're going to have the best shock cavalry in the region, which was probably adopted from this kind of idea of Thracians that were kind of like very good, very aggressive, very dynamic horse soldiers.
Yeah, Herodotus here literally says that they are Thracians. Like he says, before he came to the Ishtar, he first subdued the Getae, who pretend to be immortal. The Thracians in the Salmodisis and the country above the towns of Apollonia and Mesembria, who are called Cyrene and Nipsae, surrendered themselves unresisting to Darius, But the Getai, who are the bravest and most law-abiding of the Thracians, he calls them Thracians, resisted with obstinacy. So it's interesting how, and then he goes on to talk about, and as they're claimed to be immortal, this is how they show it. They believe that they do not die, but that he who perishes goes to the god Selmoxis, which is, it's connected to Semele in there, Semele, Oxus, or Gebel-Isis, as some of them call, once in every 5, by the way, Semele is Dionysus' mother, so there's a connection to Dionysus here. Once in every 5 years, they choose by lot one of their people and send him a messenger to Selmoxis, charged to tell of their needs, and this is their manner of sending.
That's
3
awesome.
lances are held by men thereto appointed. Others seize the messenger of Selmoxis by his hands and feet and swing and hurl him aloft to the spear points.
Yep.
If he's killed by the cast, they believe the god regards them with favor. Wow,
Right.
that's interesting.
He got the
But if
message.
he's not killed, they blame the messenger, deeming him a bad man. Anyways, wow. The Thracians, man, or the Getai, I should say. That's pretty
That's
intense.
Pretty aggressive form of necromancy, huh? Because you're going to make the messenger, the live messenger, dead so he can take the message to the gods. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but it's funny. He calls the Getai Thracian. It's interesting.
And I would too. If you twisted my arm, I'd say what we have in the archaeological record and even the literary record, which you know me, I push back on the literary record as an archaeologist.
They're like Americans and Canadians,
right? And
they speak the similar languages.
But I think when we look particularly in the region of Scythia Minor and we look at what we see as Getic, it's closer related, and their language appears to be closer related to the Thracian tongues that are. Remember, we only have so much Thracian language preserved in epigraphy, but even when we talk about Getic or the Getai, it appears closer into what we call Thracian. Again, I wish I have some, like a colleague I told you about, Petra Hermanova. She specializes in like reconstructing Thracian language. It would have been great to have her on. So at some point. Mm-hmm.
So Lara Knight says, thank you for the 5. I am the bright and morning star. Revelation 22. Our sun is the bright morning star. Interesting point. Last one here from Accounts. Civilization started in Thrace.
The Thracians would say you're right.
Yeah, the Thracians would agree with you on that one. Interesting. Anyways, let's go back to the Thracian riders. We have some more time, right?
Yeah, we do. Let's real quick throw up that Danubian thing. Let me go through some of the iconography first so people can see, and then we'll talk about some of the cultic implications of it.
The Danubian, that's the one that we were showing before
Right.
I went off on a tangent about Christmas, right?
Right. Half an hour.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me just find where did I put that one?
So while he looks for that, just so everybody in the audience knows, Neil and I probably talk on the phone at least twice a week. This is how our conversations go. I'll call him with a question like, hey, help me find this or do this on video. And then we'll start talking crazy stuff about archaeology. And then 2 hours later, my wife's like, are you still talking to Neil on the phone? And I'll say, yes.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yep.
I did find it. It is right here. Here we go.
Okay. So again, we see the image of obviously Sol Invictus on 4-horse chariot. Below that, though, before we go down, do you see the 2 stars over the twin pairs of horses that are both looking in opposite directions?
Yeah, this is the evening and morning star that we just mentioned.
Nope, stop. It's a different. It's a good guess, but going down into that next panel, right? You see 2 guys standing opposite each other.
A horseman?
No, on the very edges. Yeah. So can you tell me who those guys are?
Oh, is that the twins?
That is
Castor and Pollux.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now they're pictured and they're also often pictured in, I don't want to give all the Mithraic stuff, but again, then in between we have the 2 horsemen. Now these appear to be
ready for this? Ready real quick before you say anything. It's funny that you mentioned that because the Samothracians also venerate. Where did I have this slide? I know I have a slide here somewhere.
Don't get
here we
too
go.
Tangent.
Look at this. They have the 2 horsemen as the twins.
Correct.
Dioscuri
were mounted.
The sons of Zeus.
Depictions. Correct.
Do you think that's what's going on here with Thracian?
Well, possibly. It's thought that the Thracian horsemen are actually that cultic element coming in from the Thracian rider motif, but they're being aggrandized more than they have. So it's possible. But
Yeah.
they're definitely deified people in a Thracian style.
Yeah.
So that may be an adoption directly from the Thracian writers, or again, adopting this other motif that would have. See, things can mean two things, right? This is what's important in cultic iconography, is someone to say, "Oh, that's the Thracian writers," while at the same time saying it's the mounted images. Now, what's funny is each panel is internally referent. The two stars above both reference the two figures below it.
Yeah, because you can see the two horses right there.
No, and the two Dioscuri below it as well. Those stars, in all likelihood, represent are cultically represent the Dioscuri. Now, between those two horsemen is a feminine figure. Now, in some panels, her hands are down. In other panels, she has a hand up, like this, or like this, which is typically associated with secrecy, sacred oaths. Many people interpret it as the god, Nemesis, because she talks a lot of her like she's about secrecy, not telling, about sacred oaths. A few people, and I don't know where I go on this, but since you're so into the Eleusinian mysteries, think it may be a representative of the god Desponia. But I don't know. That's just
the lady.
Someone threw that out there once.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was crazy, although it's not my position, right?
But look at this. You got this, the Thracian horse, or not the Thracian, I'm sorry, the Dioscuri, they always had these stars above their heads. Look at this one. Star above it on his head. That is a very common symbol.
Tradition.
Yeah, that's you constantly see them with stars. Right. Look at, there it is.
Right, and that's
stars on their heads.
That's why I couldn't give it to you as an easy question. But see,
there it is again. Look at this. This one's from Egypt, bro. Stars on their heads, same stars. Well, so yeah, there's something definitely going on there.
And a star appeared above a certain god's son too. But
nice. That's a good point, dude. That's a great point, dude.
So again, going back to the iconography, again, this is going to get into the mystery cult, right? And tie some stuff in. You go down through that panel, the next one down. This is the cultic element. Okay, we're going to skip the next.
There's the serpent tree again with the.
But we're going to skip down to the bottom one.
All right.
Okay. So again, we're looking here at a cock or a chicken, but a rooster, a snake.
That's a very famous symbol of Dionysus and Mercury.
Okay.
And for initiations.
A vessel, right? A crater, and over here a lion,
and then the fire,
and then a tripod or a brazier, right?
Yeah.
What's important here is this. This is the Principia Vitae, the sources of life. Basically, these are cultic symbols: earth, wind, fire, water.
No doubt about that.
Leo, the lion, fire, water, obviously in the vessel, right? Earth, and air, right? So again, these are.
Guess what? You ready for this?
Okay.
Do you know who also uses this symbol in their iconography? Ready for people watching this are gonna love this. Hold on, let me just.
I think I know the answer, but
I think you do. But let me just pull it up because there's a famous Christian symbol. This is a Christian symbol, by the way. Let me just pull this up. And if you notice something on this, rooster and serpent legs. That's a very cultic image of the air, land, and water. Now, this one they use a man instead of a lion, but you can see them. The idea is there: air, land, water, and it's very cultic. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So the whole. What was your idea?
No, I'll go with you later. We'll do another episode on it.
So you have a rooster, a snake, and in this case, the lion instead of a man.
Right. And people have looked into this again. There's several scholars like Nora Dimitrova. Again, I apologize to all these very renowned Eastern scholars from Bulgaria and Romania, because sometimes I don't pronounce her name because typically they have an Americanized name when they're talking to you in English. But again, like Soren Nemeti is someone who's really spent a lot of time. Soren is an absolutely wonderful scholar, and he's in Romania. But when you look at, for example, that bottom panel, those are cultic images. These are not things that are going to be discussed outside the mystery cult. And the reason we know that there's a mystery cult is that panel we haven't looked at yet, that second to last panel.
Yeah.
So if you look over here,
is that Anubis?
No, I'll describe these guys. And some of the panels are better than others. There's typically this way this panel is represented is there is two cultic figures, typically men with heavy beards. There's a third person, it usually looks like a younger man. Both of the cultic figures, we're just going to call them priests for right now, and we'll talk about who they are later, are wearing Phrygian caps. So they have beards, Phrygian caps, and what they're doing is watching while a young man kills a ram and skins it and hangs the skin on a tree. That's what you're seeing depicted there.
Right here?
That's not the best
Ram
image.
on a thicket motif right there.
Correct.
From the Bible.
And you see he's actually hanging.
And it's also from the Argonauts, the golden ram,
the fleece.
The golden fleece on the tree.
Right. So let's
very
go
cultic,
ahead.
Very
right,
cultic.
again.
We're getting deep into the mystery right
Walter
now.
Burkert would have lost his mind on this.
That's
right?
what I was
Same
thinking of.
with
Walter
Fraser,
Burkert.
right?
Yeah, Walter Burkett's the one I'm reading right now, who likes to show how much Babylonian influences there is on Greek culture.
In this middle panel, what we're seeing is a sacred meal. Now, other panels that are more elaborate than this one have some additional elements to it. And what they'll show is the two men, right, hanging the skin that's been skinned onto the person who looks like he's kneeling over, right? Now, it's been theorized that what this is representing is a cultic transformation. Some people think that this is a life/death because you take on the imagery of the now slain beast, then you stand up, right?
And resurrect. That's where the word comes from.
Right.
Stand up.
And then the skin is taken off of you.
Anastasia. And that's
so
where the word comes from.
And when the skin is taken off you in some of these depictions, then sometimes the men appear naked. Sometimes they you can't really tell from the iconography if they are nude or not. Now, there's, in addition to like a death and resurrection narrative or death and rebirth narrative, it could be like a transformation from a lower order person.
Yeah,
right?
that's the catabasis and the anabasis,
from
the
a
descent
natural
and the
right,
and the rise.
Correct. And maybe this is a symbolic, right, from being an animal to no longer being an animal and being a man. So there's different ways to interpret this cultic phenomena. I don't think the death and resurrection or death and rebirth narrative is wrong. I just think, given the iconography, we can't be as sure. But what's happening in that middle panel is a ritual feast. Now, the ritual feast includes all kinds of shit with it in many cases. You'll see fish are a prominent feature, by the way, and often they're either depicted on the table, on the ground, or part of the cultic elements in the Danubian writer panels. But it's typically two or three men who aren't necessarily the priest, by the way. They're drawn differently when we can tell. The problem is some of these plaques are worn so bad, right? We're doing a little bit of guesswork. But there's a cultic meal that's highly ritualized after this rebirth narrative or this transcendence narrative where you go from a lower order of being to a higher order of being.
Ready? You ready for this? I gotta jump in. I gotta jump in real quick. We were talking about Sol Invictus Mithrae just a second ago.
Okay.
Look at this. Invicto Mithrae, and they're having a sacred meal. They're at a table. There's the tripod. See, 1, 2, 3.
Correct.
There's a lion. There's a snake, and there's the two guys with the Phrygian hats on, dude.
Correct.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
I did not know you. As soon as you started naming all the details, my mind went, "Whoa! What about that one thing you saw from before?" And it all lines up. There's your lion. There's your tripod. There's your snake. There's your two men with Phrygian hats, and there's your sacred meal. They're sitting at a table.
Now, I'm just going to tell you, I agree with Soren Nemeti that what this was.
Oh, there's a ram right there too.
You're just going to keep going. That's awesome. But what I think is important is that it appears that the influence in this region, right, was a synchronization with some Roman elements. We want to call them Greco-Roman, or Romano-Persian, whatever you want to call the cult of Mithras, right? But then the cult was adopted into the cult of the Danubian writers. It's not the cult of Mithras anymore. It's the cult of the Danubian writers, which probably had some very important links to cults outside of the region. Again, i.e., the cult of Mithras, relations to Sol Invictus, Greek mystery cults. Right?
Look at this, dude. There's your snake and tripod again. There's your sacred meal. There's your two guys with Phrygian hats again. And that's, guess what? That's Mithras and Sol. This is one of the few examples. This is the one I show. I always show this one. This is one of the few examples where you have Mithras and Sol as two different characters at the same table. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and it looks like Sol's leaning in, right? Like
yeah.
Are they?
He's reclining on Mithras.
Are they holding hands though?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. He's definitely. He looks like it. It reminds me of Jesus and the young boy from John who reclines on Jesus's lap. Doesn't it?
It does. I mean, iconography doesn't lie. But yeah. So again, so
is that a lion? Tell me that's a lion, bro.
Where?
Right here.
No, it looks like a face of a human upside down.
Oh, it's the river god. Oh. Okay. Yeah, but I was going to say that's pretty crazy. All right. Anyways,
but when we look at this cult, this is another mystery cult operating in what would be today northern Bulgaria and Romania. That
there it is again. Dio Invicto Mithrae.
You're obsessed.
I'm on top of it.
This is a mystery cult that really didn't get discussed till the last 40 or 50 years, even hypothesized.
Yeah.
But it's been the archaeological record looking at all of these elements that. Okay, there's obviously some cultic preservation of mystery rites in these cultic elements. It does appear that it was regionalized as a mystery religion. We don't find cults to the Danubian writers outside of these regions of the Roman Empire. It appears that once Christianity took over, these cults were suppressed or died out, whichever term you want to take. But we have evidence now of a previously unknown in the historic record mystery cult that operated probably from the late 2nd through the 4th century, based on when we do the archaeology and we're able to date most of the stuff, or put in a chronological frame, right? So we have a good reason to assume that in another reason where Christianity is going to be very, very popular, that there was an earlier or at least simultaneous cultic expression in the form of a mystery religion, which was highly localized, but syncretized with elements outside of the region, as well as maintaining some very important regional elements that were ethnically or ethnocentric to that group of people, and ethnically identifiable, which I think is really important. And it shows how fluid beliefs and iconography and expression can be in the ancient world. And that's really all I came here to say. So
wow.
About the cult of the Danubian horseman.
I love it, dude. And look at another similar image with the sacred meal and the tripod. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on with this imagery, and I think what you're saying is spot on.
Oh, one of the.
I think your interpretation is undeniable. Actually, look, you have the sacred meal. Looks like one's reclining,
right?
Or maybe both reclining.
Well, typically, what it looks like, and oh, by the way, over here, those two guys standing there watching. In other reliefs, they are in front of a.
Yeah.
Look, it looks like the front of a temple.
Typically, but wait a minute, though.
An archway.
I just pulled up
initiation.
Yeah, they're naked. You can tell that's initiation. Mm-hmm. That's what. Whenever you see naked, it means initiation.
Correct.
It means they're taking off their old garments, putting on new garments.
The same
language is
the or bathing.
Yeah, the same language is found all over the same language is found all over the New Testament. Taking off the old garments, putting on new garments, the white garments. Yeah.
And we do know that this was associated with temple complex because a lot of the iconography have them walking into or out of a temple.
But here's what I wanted to get across, though. I just pulled up so quickly. I was able to pull up 3 or 4 images where Mithras is involved. Mithras is involved with a sacred meal, a tripod, a snake, or maybe some sort of rooster. And this is why I think your interpretation of this being Mithras, or at the very least Sol Invictus.
No, I think it's Sol Invictus.
Yeah, I'm saying Sol Invictus.
In this particular panel, right?
Yeah. But here's what I'm trying to say though. Sol Invictus is a Mithraic god.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if it's the same god or not. It's part of this same Roman imperial tradition.
Correct. And I think what was happening was some of these Thracians and others coming home from the Roman military had been exposed to the Mithraic cult. And rather than projecting the Mithraic cult in this region, because by the way, we do have some, but not very many expressions of that in the region, but we do see a hell of a lot of expression of the cult of the Danubian horseman, which means they regionalized it. They took some of that element they had learned as good soldiers. Maybe they weren't members of the cult. They learned about the cult. Maybe the cult wasn't as secretive as everybody thinks it was. Maybe a few of the members joined, but then returned home to Thrace. They set up their own specialized, localized cult going, well, the Roman one was great, or the Persian one, however you want to say it, got in the Roman Empire. I think it was Romanized. But but they definitely said, hey, in Thrace, in this area of Moesia, we are going to have our own cultic expression in the form of a mystery cult that's going to bring in some elements from outside the region as far as the iconography, but it's ours. And it's localized, and it is a mystery cult associated with our ethne, right? And that ethne was pretty broad. It was a bunch of Greeks, Romans, and Thracians, right? Living together, culturally intermixed, but they were expressing this form of religious expression in the form of a mystery cult. It's pretty obvious. Now, the reason we know there's a mystery cult associated with too is you might be able to guess, the mystagogues are the guys with the beards and the Phrygian hats, and we see them always in certain panel depictions.
It's like the Magi looking for Jesus,
and they're the ones that appear to be performing all the sacred rites in these.
They are the Magi, actually. Think about it.
So again, this appeared to be a cult that had at least 2 levels of initiation. Again, not that it paralleled the Eleusinian mysteries or anything like that, but again, it wouldn't be uncommon for these types of expressions to occur in regions outside of, Greece or Egypt or Rome. It appears that in this particular region, it was localized, it was individualized for their own identity and reasons, but it gave them a unique opportunity at expression in the form of a mystery cult from the 2nd through 4th century. Now, could it have been earlier? Yeah, we don't know. The archaeology is still kind of mixed on earlier, but it does appear that by the end of the 4th and into the 5th century, this cult was heavily suppressed because it all of a sudden becomes absence from the archaeological record. So,
yeah. Before we get out of here, I just want to show someone. This is an introduction to. This is from Loeb. This is not Julian's hymn yet, but the person who wrote the introduction, which was, I don't actually know who wrote this, but this is really interesting. He says, Julian is from the Neoplatonic school, and he says, it is Mithras, the Persian sun god, rather than Apollo, whom Julian identifies with his intellectual god, Helios. And Apollo plays a minor part among his manifestations. Now, why I'm pointing this out, because we're talking 4th century, where Sol Invictus is in a way is like another face of Mithras, according to Julian.
Right. I don't disagree.
Yeah, he says Mithras worship, which Tertullian called a satanic plagiarism of Christianity. Just think about that for a second. 3rd century, Tertullian is calling Mithras worship a plagiarism of Christianity. Why would he say that if they're not similar? Just think about that. Just use your freaking head. All right. Because in certain of its rites, it recalled the sacraments of the Christian church, first made its appearance among the Romans in the 1st century BCE, less hospitably received at first than the cults of Isis and Serapis and the Great Mother of Pessinus. It gradually overpowered them and finally dominated the whole Roman Empire, though it was never welcomed by the Hellenes. For the Romans, it supplied the ideals of purity, devotion, and self-control, which the other cults had lacked. The worshippers of Mithras were taught to contend against the powers of evil, submitted themselves to severe moral discipline, and the reward after death was to become as pure as the gods to whom they ascend. If Christianity, says Renan, had been checked in its growth by some deadly disease, the world would have become Mithraic. I 100% agree with that statement.
I don't.
You don't? Okay. Let me just continue this. I want to hear your thoughts in a second.
Yeah.
Julian, like the Emperor Commodus, in the 2nd century, had no doubt been initiated into the mysteries of Mithras, and the severe discipline of the cult was profoundly attractive to one who had been estranged by early associations from the very similar teachings of the Christians. And it says, Julian followed Plotinus and Iamblichus, making the supreme principle, the one, or the good, that's Plato, which presides over the intelligible world, where the rule, Plato's ideas, Plato's forms, now called intelligible gods, Iamblichus imported the Neoplatonic system, the intermediary world of the intellectual gods. On them, Helios Mithras, their supreme god and center, bestows the intelligence and creative and unifying forces that were received from his transcendence counterpart among the intelligible gods. The third member of the triad is they even have their own trinity. The third member of the triad of the sense perception governed by the sun, the visible counterpart of Helios. Now, one more thing I just want to go to. I just want to go to Julian's own words himself, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. Julian's own words himself, he says right here, do you wish to mention yet another proof of this? The work of King Numa. In Rome, maiden priestesses guard the undying flame of the sun at different hours in turn. They guard the fire that is produced of earth by the agency of the god. And I can tell you a still greater proof of all that, of the power of this god, which is the work that is the most divine king himself. The months are reckoned from the moon by, one may say, all other peoples, but we and the Egyptians alone reckon the days of every year according to the movements of the sun. That's just a whole big clue on the whole solstice thing right there too. If after this I should say that we also worship Mithras and celebrate in honor of Helios every 4 years. Notice how they links those two together right there. I shall be speaking of the customs that are somewhat recent. Now, that's what I wanted to point out, because he continues to call this god Helios, but he points out right there, these are honor of Mithras. This is a Mithraic cult of the sun. Well, that's the best way I would describe it.
So two things, and first is we don't know very much about what the cult of Mithras revealed to its inner secrets. It's very possible, and I think it's highly probable, that one of the things that were revealed to these Mithraic initiates, and as they progress through the 7 ranks of the Mithraic cult or whatever, that all of these powerful sun deities and even other deities outside of sun deities were actually aspects of the god Mithras. Sol was Mithras, Helios was Mithras, maybe even Jupiter was Mithras. Like, again, we
Jupiter,
see
Jupiter Heliopolitanus is
right.
a solar. It's his solar Jupiter, which yeah,
right, exactly. So I think, again, going into this great god concept, and we see that in mystery cults. Same thing happened with Isis, right? Isis is all female divinity wrapped into one divine essence, right? By all her names she may be called, but ultimately she is the greatest of all. She is the goddess Isis, right? Same thing. I think this may have been where the Mithraic cult was going. Why I don't think the Mithraic cult would have ever overtaken Christianity is because it was too elite.
Well, that's what I was going to say to you. I knew you'd say that, and I agree with you on that.
Right, Christianity would take anybody.
This is what I think.
And actually,
this is what I think was happening.
Went after the destitute and non-connected, the disenfranchised.
Yeah, but I also think, I think Christianity had its more upper echelon ranks that not everyone can join. So the way I would explain late antiquity Roman imperial cult, which was, I'm talking Julian's time, 4th, 5th century, right, would be, you have the exoteric religion, which is Sol Invictus on top, which is a very solar religion. All the gods are involved. Like, you still have all the gods. You still have all the traditional gods, like Minerva and Romulus. They're all being honored in these different festivals. But on top of this divine hierarchy is Sol Invictus, the head god. Even some would even call him Jupiter. Actually, Jupiter would actually be another word. Jupiter Optimus Maximus is the head god. So they call him different names, and one of them is Mithras. Now, that's the exoteric. That's for everyone. That's to the public mysteries. Right. Then you had the esoteric, which is only male only, which is only very certain people get initiated, and you go meet in caves and shit. That's Mithraism. So, but they're both part of the Roman imperial cult.
I agree,
and they're both Mithraic at its core. So I don't think you can, and I agree with you that the inner mysteries of the religion was for the elites, but they still had an exoteric religion, and that religion would have been the Western religion if Christianity didn't win out.
See,
we would all be worshiping the sun right now. Wouldn't that be awesome? What
made Christianity unique as a mystery cult was everybody was inducted into the mystery.
That's true.
And so,
it doesn't matter if you're poor, rich, black,
right,
white,
and
German, French. It doesn't matter what you were.
At a certain
woman,
point,
female,
right,
doesn't matter.
Right. And eventually
that was Christianity's strength. Absolutely.
What was a hidden mystery later becomes a public mystery when Christianity becomes a dominant religion.
Yes.
And eventually it pluralizes itself. Mithraism was working in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And that's
I agree.
why, and I think Christianity was just again, early critics of the early philosophical critics of Christianity called it right. They'll let anybody join. Women, children, slaves, and particularly like men that weren't critical thinkers, like the poor, peasants. These were the kind of things that drew people outside of the other traditions. Like exactly, the Eleusinian mysteries were pretty open, right? But they were typically
not really though. You did have to get asked to be. You did have to go through. Like you weren't just allowed to just walk in there.
Well, but same thing with Christianity early on.
Yes,
right? You had to be sponsored in. But
you had to be sponsored in, right?
Eleusinian mysteries were kind of regionally limited.
Yeah,
right. People, unlike
they made a big deal. They made a big deal out of the Roman when a Roman period started to expand their. Right. People local made a big deal out of it, and they had to. The way they had to explain it to them was Hercules came from abroad, and we initiated Hercules. So therefore, we have a precedent now. We can initiate Caesar now,
right?
And that's how they got them to say yes.
They had, but basically, they remained a localized cult for the regular people of the region, except social elites that came in from the outside. What I'm trying to point out is they didn't proselytize. Neither did the Mithraic cult. Christianity took their church to you, their mysteries to you.
Yes.
And that is what was unique about Christianity in the period. Now,
this is an interesting point, though, about I was just going to say real quick about the demise of the Eleusinian mysteries. This is why I want to push back a little bit and say I think the person is right that the Mithraism would have taken over the world. Here's why. You mentioned the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the most popular mysteries ever. Cicero says that the greatest thing mankind has ever produced was the Eleusinian mysteries. I'm not kidding. I wonder if it's in there. Cicero, where is it? Here it is. For among the many excellent and divine institutions which your Athens has brought forth and contributed to human life, none, in my opinion, is better than those mysteries. For by their means we have been brought out of the barbarous and savage mode of life and educated and refined to a state of civilization. And as the rites called initiations, so in very truth we have learned from the beginnings of life and have gained the power not only to live happily, but also to die with better hope. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because when we look at the end of how the Mithraic or the Eleusinian mystery falls apart, we get a source from the late 4th century. So it says the last pagan emperor of Rome reigned from 361 to 363, about 50 years before Christian rule. Julian attempted to restore the Eleusinian mysteries. The closing of the Eleusinian mysteries in 392 by Theodosius is reported by this author, Eunapius, a historian and biographer of the Greek philosophers. Eunapius had been initiated by the last legitimate hierophant who had been commissioned by the Emperor Julian to restore the mysteries, which had fallen into decay. Now, this is the big part. According to Eunapius, the last hierophant was a usurper. This is what he writes. The man from Thespiae who held the rank of pater, father, in the mysteries of Mithras. So the last source we ever get about the Eleusinian mysteries is from a guy complaining. He's complaining that the mysteries of Eleusis was taken over by the mysteries of Mithras. That the Mithraic paters, the level 7 ranking paters, had usurped the Eleusinian mysteries and made them into Mithraic mysteries. They were taking shit over. In a way, they were like the Christians. I actually compare Mithraism to Christianity, as they were kind of trying to take over. They were trying to spread.
It's not an unfair comparison, but I just think I think if you want to call proselytization, the Mithraic proselytization was much more limited.
Exactly. No, I agree with that. I agree with that part.
Military and social elites.
They were strategically trying to spread around, not let everyone, not open up the floodgates type of thing.
Christianity was like, as long as you're breathing, we'll take you.
Yeah, come on in. Give us 10% of your wealth.
Well, no, dude. Christianity was a social support system. It was.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm saying if you had it, if you were like if you were a high level patrician, you were expected to donate to the people on the bottom.
And
it was very socialistic. It was a very tax the rich type of system, very socialistic,
right? If you look at the book of Acts, and we think that's maybe how as a historian, I think that's how the church operated. I do think that patronage in the Roman system was how these early Christians were able to recruit so many people. Is you don't have a pair of fucking shoes. Sorry, you don't have a pair of shoes. Join the Christian church, right? You need sandals. Same thing. Like the whole thing was Saint Nicholas, right? Like again, it was about feeding the poor, destitute, providing clothes and shoes, right? Like this idea.
Kloppenborg points out in this book right here, Christ Association, he says that the rich patricians, when they joined and they donated a lot of money, they would get these plaques in honor of them. Right. And that was a way of getting people to join. And if you had money, like, we're going to honor you. And like almost like a deification. Like, you're going to have a huge plaque with your name on it, and we're going to remember you as a saint forever. And people wanted that. People wanted to be remembered. That was a very good way of getting people who were rich to join and be someone to donate. Because then all of a sudden you get a giant plaque with your name on it, and you're remembered as this great Christian hero.
And you start a church, or you're associated with a church. You would fund a church. All of a sudden, you get massive social standing. Whether or not the Roman patrician system was inclined to do this anyway, I think it was. But patronage being an important aspect in Roman society. But the one thing that women could do is they could be patrons of the Christian church early on too. Women can gain social prominence that they may not have been able to gain in other aspects. So again, this was very Christianity had the right juice to get
it also explodes during a really tough time. During that third and fourth century was tough. Yeah, we had the third century crisis.
Absolutely.
And then you had the fourth century is a big warring period between all these different warring states. Christianity makes sense during a time like that, where it's like, oh, why am I suffering? Well, I'm like Job. I'm supposed to suffer. I'm like Christ. I'm supposed to carry my cross.
Christians were apparently...
It had the psychological capability to fix people during a time like that.
And again, whether or not you think Philip the Syrian or Philip the Arab, the emperor, was a Christian, it appears that Christianity was starting to get quite a bit of political pull.
He minted coins. He minted coins with Noah's Ark on it in that time.
I think he was a Christian.
Yeah.
But I think he was
a
Christian.
Apparently he got baptized. So
in the same vein as Constantine, right? Like, hey, these people are politically moving and shaking, and we have to give them some deference. And that's, again, Philip's killed what, 360, 370? No, sorry, no, 260, 270, right? Like he's long before Constantine, right?
Yeah, look at this one right here. This is 250 actually,
250, right? So like
look at this is Noah's Ark medallion, minted by Philip and from 244 to 249. So tell me, why would you? And we know this is Noah's Ark because we have other ones that actually have Noah right here. It's not Deucalion. He could have minted a coin of Deucalion surviving a flood, but he didn't. He chose to go with Noah from the Bible. So that, like it says right there, Noah and his wife stand in the chest, floating on waves from the biblical scene. So why would you so seriously, why would you?
No, I'm sorry, I messed up the date. I was off 20 years.
No, you're right.
But absolutely.
The Sibylline oracles at that time proclaimed Noah guarded just this. By the way, this is another big key in understanding the conversion of the Roman religion from pagan to Christian. Read the Sibylline oracles. What you're seeing almost a subversive transfer of the pagan rites to Christianity. When you read the Sibylline oracles, you see it starts off very pagan. You got your Jupiter, you got your Demeter, you got your Orpheus, you got Jason. And then as the story progresses, you start getting Noah introduced in the story, and then eventually you get Christ.
I'm just going to say that throughout the broadcast, I've been watching Neo Prototype in the chat. He's fucking hilarious, dude. Like he's been, and he did call it right. He says, hey, Neil's going to keep pulling this guy off of what he wants to talk about back into like Christmas and Sol Invictus, which you did perfectly throughout this broadcast.
Yeah. I always look for good opportunities to sort of cross-reference to my...
He's definitely right. Deucalion would have been too long to write. Noah's much shorter, made more sense.
Yeah, that's true.
So when are we doing this again? 2 weeks?
Yeah, let's do this again in 2 weeks. This is the last super chat. Like Constantine, generals and emperors began worshiping Isis 50 CE, which prior to that was illegal, like Christianity could. Well, I would say about this, I agree. There was a period of time when it was illegal during Augustus's reign, and that was because of Cleopatra and Antony being sponsors of Isis worship. So in the East, Isis worship was big. Yeah. After Augustus conquers the East and makes it all into his own empire, then you had a little period of time when Isis worship was done. There was no more. I don't know how illegal it was. Maybe it was illegal, but I know exactly as soon as he died, Tiberius brought it back.
Right. And it doesn't look that in what we call the Eastern Roman provinces that the cult of Isis was ever fully suppressed. It was definitely not
very popular.
You weren't doing it in Italy or in Rome because of the connotation to it. Like you're subversive, fucker.
Yeah, he shut down the temples in Rome for a period of time.
It does appear that outside of Rome, particularly in the East, that, governors and other people were just either turning a blind eye or they had been members of the cult themselves. So they were all like, it doesn't, again, there's archaeology that shows that they may have went in decline, but they didn't go away. And even if they were in decline, it wasn't major decline.
Yeah. Well, Isis worship was big all the way from the Hellenistic period through.
That's a cult, a mystery cult that I think could have taken Christianity out. Yeah.
They're very similar too.
I think Isis had a good chance.
You've done a lot of research into that stuff, right? Isis.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that next time.
Well, yeah, but if I'm going to bring on someone about Isis, I'm going to bring on my buddy Rob Caudill. That's this whole thing is Isis.
Do you want to do that next time, Isis?
Yeah, we'll do Isis next time.
That's what we'll do in 2 weeks from now. We'll do Isis.
Yep. We'll have to read.
All right. Well, anything else you want to promote? Anything else you want to promote or talk about before we go?
Well, if anybody's a resident of Washington State and you want to take any classes with me, you can enroll at Peninsula College. I teach archaeology-related coursework online this winter, in addition to other courses. But I'll be teaching a course, The Archaeology of Death and Burial, where you look at burial types throughout the world, mostly Mediterranean, but I do bring in other stuff from like Mesoamerica and North America as well. Variety in what can we tell from archaeological remains of the deceased. Also regarding the type of burial that they obtained, about ancient cultures, traditions, belief systems, and such. Beyond that, I'm still currently digging in the UK each summer. If anybody's interested in ever volunteering on an archaeological site for a couple of weeks, shoot Neil an email or get in contact with me at Peninsula College. I like to have people who are interested in paying their own way. I can't afford to pay for you. It's you pay your own freight. But it's a unique opportunity to maybe go and work a summer doing what many people have on a bucket list. It's not the cheapest thing to do, but you're going to go this summer, so I thought I might as well push it out there.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. I appreciate you coming on.
You better, because I already saved you a spot. You said you're
nice. And you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.